There's an interesting study in the American Psychology Association that shows that people with this type of resilience are 6 times more likely to achieve their goals than people without it. So there's a real benefit to cultivating this for yourself. And so the link between mental resilience and success has been proven. And when you talk to entrepreneurs who've been extremely successful, you'll hear them talk about failure as part of the journey to success. And no one ever gets a straight run. There's no super lucky person out there who had an idea, started a business, and became successful without a whole bunch of setbacks. So it's really important to think about setbacks as best you can as part of the process and as part of a learning process. Now, I don't mean to think that you should put rose-tinted glasses and not actually acknowledge your feelings. And later on this afternoon, when we talk about mindset, I'll talk a lot about acknowledging feelings so that you really become aware of what moves you. But it's really just noticing what goes on for you and what's driving you and what are some of the building blocks that you can use to help you when things get tough. And the first building block is really coming down to these things that we call core values. So what I want to do first is I want to get your thoughts on mental resilience. So let's do this in the chat area. If everybody could take a few minutes or a minute or so and just write the answer to what is mental resilience. So if you could just go ahead and let me see your own thinking on mental resilience, that would be excellent. I'm assuming everybody's got access to the chat. Here we go. And for anybody who's just arrived, what we're doing in the chat is answering the question, what is mental resilience?
Tim, actually, chat and microphone are disabled.
Oh.
That's what we're getting here in the Q&A.
I just saw that. Can we enable the microphones? Or the chat?
Okay, we will try to do that right now.
Sorry, guys. So while that's happening, because obviously I don't want to make this a one-way traffic. That would be weird, wouldn't it? Some Irishman talking to you. Let me give you like a quick introduction of myself while we're getting chat enabled. I've been a coach for 30 years. I actually started off in IT. And before that, I went to art college. So I was in, my plan was I was going to go be a painter, live in a garret in the south of France, probably cut my ear off. And then I realized that, you can't really make much money at that, certainly not from where I was coming from. And I took a job and then I moved into the IT sector, working for one of the big German manufacturers. And I discovered that I love businesses and really enjoyed the process of going in to understand how a business worked and how to help them computerize it from an accounting point of view. So I worked in accounting services. Um, when I eventually set up my own business, it was my last role was really working out people development strategies for one of the IT companies. So I then went into business into the area of people development because I just saw a huge gap and not enough companies investing in their people and teaching them the sort of skills they need to be successful. And from there, I grew a number of businesses, all 11 altogether. And we had a global presence. So we had offices in Singapore and Sydney in the States, and we offered these people development services. And when I set up Brilliant Buttons, it was my last, before I retire. And it was really about how to use technology to help coach more people and get them this sort of information, which is really important. Um, and so Brilliant Buttons app is actually a platform that can provide you with a virtual coach as well as really good content like we're discussing this morning, and allows people to carry on with their own personal development. If you're a company, you can set up an account, and with that you get more services, you get a dedicated coach, and you get real support in terms of helping you build the programs you need for your people. So have we enabled chat?
Yes, we have chat now.
Okay. So if we go back to the exercise, I'd love to know what everybody thinks mental toughness is. So if you were defining it, how would you define it? And drop those into chat. Yep. So we've got things like don't give up easily, and then I think that's the outcome of your mental toughness, that you don't give up easily. Carry on with the job when you're under unfavorable circumstances. Yeah, I think that, and defining the job, especially if you're leading the team, is really important. So, carry on with your leadership even under those difficult circumstances. Change your thinking style. That's a great one. And with a changing world. So as the world shows up, I wrote a cartoon yesterday, which was if the world gives you lemons, scream. The old adage of make lemonade, I think, just makes little of the difficulty you face, but certainly change your thinking style. I guess not being flexible on a mental level. Yeah, I think mental toughness is about recognizing the belief system that you're setting up. And some of that belief system is going to be really important and really useful for you. And some of that belief system is actually, the piece that you need to modify. So that being flexible relates really to the mental belief system that can bring you down. Who knows how to start with the problem and break it down step. So breaking the problem down step by step, yeah, that's a good response to a difficult situation. Being mentally resilient is the ability to adapt to difficult circumstances. Yep, absolutely an output. And the ability to bounce back. So I think, yeah, the ability to bounce back is a good way to capture what it is. So that sense of I can get back to where I was or where I need to be is really important. So I mean, there's a couple of images that sort of stick in my head when I think about it. The ability to bounce back is part of it. So there's something before you bounce back. There's something about recognizing the fact that you feel what you feel and recognizing that you may even feel crushed, you may feel knocked down, you may feel disappointed. So it's not about ignoring those feelings, it's about using those to bounce back. And that'll become clear this afternoon when we go into the mindset meter. There's a great old African adage, and it says, the wind does not break a tree that bends. And I think that's part of what you've got to be able to do. So setbacks are going to come. And like a really strong wind, they're going to blow through the branches of your tree. And you have to let them move you. So it's not about becoming robotic. It's not about becoming someone that doesn't have emotions and feelings. It's really letting it move you and then coming back from that, resetting after you've been moved. And I think one of the other things I've discovered, which took me a long time to discover, certainly when I was a younger man, leading an organization, I got my first role as a CEO when I was 30. I didn't know the importance of being vulnerable. I didn't really understand the importance of telling people how I felt. I had a belief system in my mind that said I had to be the strong one. I had to be the one that didn't show emotions. I had to be the one that could take it on the chin. And I've since learned that is, a really imperfect belief system. Because what it wasn't allowed people to do was to recognize that I too had the challenges that they were faced. And so it didn't let me build the sort of empathy I would like with some people. And it also, I think, left people thinking that I was, as one person said to me, we just thought you were a robot. You could just come to work every day no matter what was happening. And so I got dehumanized by it. So that, proverb of, you're the tree and the wind goes through and you can move with it, is a really important image to keep in your mind. There's another one. It's as Confucius said it, so it's not quite a proverb, but it's the green reed which bends in the wind is stronger than the mighty oak. In other words, and I think that speaks to what I've said about when I was younger. Green reeds are young and they tend to be more supple. And so they don't break when the wind comes strong. So I think bringing part of your natural youthfulness to bear in these situations, not being afraid to express yourself. And I think that's particularly important both for men and women. So you both have maybe grown up with different belief systems because of your gender. And therefore you'll approach this idea about being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts differently. And I think that's the part of the piece that you have to try and tap into and you have to try and change. Find the belief systems that are really important and find the ones that are supportive to you, and then find the ones that are less supportive and make those adjustments. Now, that process you don't do in weeks. That process takes years, and therefore, I think as part of building your mental toughness is there's a real need to constantly build your self-awareness. Constantly check in and find out, do I stand for what I thought I stood for? Am I operating the way I thought I operated? How do people experiencing me? And is it different than I thought they should be experiencing? And certainly as I led organizations and teams and projects over the years, I discovered lots of times that I was being experienced quite different than I thought I was. And so you've got to become a scholar of yourself to build your self-awareness. And that's a big part of building this resilience. The second part of it then comes from how you can learn from failure. Now, I don't know if we have breakout rooms yet. Elena, do we have the opportunity to do breakouts?
Not at the minute yet, no.
So, DSC team, I would love it if we could do breakouts and let participants talk to each other. Can you let me know if that's a possibility? And whilst we're thinking about that, uh, one of the things that I'd really like you all to think about, and we've got chat open so we can do it here. If you could you share a learning experience you had from a significant failure? So think of something that's happened in the recent past that's been a significant failure, and think about describe it as best you can in a few lines and what you think you learned from it. And if you haven't learned anything yet, that's okay too. You can just put question marks at the end. I don't know what I've learned yet. But let's share a significant failure, something that's happened in the recent past that really had a good hard knock at your self-confidence. So while you're doing that, someone's asked the question, why is it important to express yourself? I mean, I really believe the importance of expressing yourself and what's going on for you. It's if you're leading people, it's almost like you do need to give people a user manual for you. This is me. I'm your leader. These are the things I think about. These are the things I value. This is how I work. This is how I work best. So expressing yourself and talking about your own fears, concerns, emotions is a way for your team to understand you as a person, because your business and you are not two separate things. Business is a function that we get involved in to make a profit and to support and help people that our business is designed around. But at the end of the day, we're just human beings. And the better that you understand your people and they understand you, the better your team works. And your goal as a leader is to build genuine trust amongst your people and yourself. And that comes from truly understanding each other. So a lot of what we'll talk about in this session is the foundation for building trust. So it's really important to think about what I call mechanisms and rituals and activities that build that over time with people. So your consistency in terms of how you deal with these situations and how you talk about them, not your consistency of emotions, that they're different. It's the consistency of how you approach failures and successes and how you talk about them, how people understand them and understand you is what's going to build trust. So is our chat working again?
It's still working.
Okay, good. So we don't have breakout rooms and we don't have microphones. So I'll just make up that you're telling me things. That'll help me. I'll use my imagination. But if you could use the chat then to give me a couple of ideas of a significant failure, that would be super helpful. Anyone brave enough to share a failure? Well, I can share one of mine, of which I have many. Oh, good, we've got one. And I'll still share one of mine, just to as we wait on a couple of other ones coming through. So I said I got my first role as CEO when I was 30. So how did that come about? I had started up my own company when I was 28. And it was growing really fast. We were doing extremely well. And I really felt that I was at the limit of my understanding. And I tried to set up a board of directors. I tried to get my fellow managers to become shareholders. And to my surprise, they didn't want it. And I met a colleague that I knew who ran a number of businesses and who was very revered. He was one of those people in the local business society that was seen as, very successful, quite sage-like, sat on a lot of people's boards. And he had a company that was in trouble. So I agreed to take it over and merge the companies. And now you remember, I came from a background of financial accounting and computer financial accounting. So sort of something I knew about. So I'd gone through the numbers and I'd looked through everything. And I remember actually ringing my poor mother, God rest her soul, one day after I'd set a whole Sunday going through the financial statements for these companies. And I said to her, Mom, these guys want to pay me a lot of money. They want to make me the CEO. But I just can't find the money they're going to pay me. And she promptly said, if you can't find the money, it's not there. Now, my mom was a housewife, so I just brushed that off as a mother trying to placate her son. Turned out she was exactly right. And that was my first real huge failure mistake. I wanted the merger more than I wanted to believe the truth and the facts of the numbers. So I ended up getting myself into a very serious debt situation. And I mean, the learnings were vast and many. But the first of which was I learned to really trust my gut instincts. My internal voice was saying I wasn't as smart as these people. I didn't have all of the education they had in financial systems. So therefore I was missing something. And what I should have been saying to myself is, you're an entrepreneur. You understand the numbers. You've been through this for years. Trust what you're telling yourself. And that would have been a big change for me. So someone has shared something that, yes, we don't like to talk about failure. So to that person, I would say, that could be a belief system that could hurt you in long term. And I know it can be cultural. Certainly when I was working in China, for instance, we don't talk about this stuff at all because of the idea of losing face. But if you're trying to build a team and you're basically also trying to understand yourself, it's important that you learn to take them out and look at them and talk about them. They don't always have to be, you might feel them as a personal failure. Like I could feel that it was my personal failure not to listen to my mother's wise words that day. But in actual fact, it was a much more complex situation. I had a lot of presentations of numbers by chartered accountants. I had advisors like PwC. So it wasn't just me sitting in a room failing on my own. It was a massive failure of a lot of people who all wanted to believe something so they could get themselves out of a hole or out of a difficult situation. So when you unpick all of that, then you can start to understand what you learn from it. Like one of the first things I learned, we had our first management meeting, and the company was about 5 million in turnover, and in services, that's a reasonable sized company. And when we had our first management meeting, there was over 20 people turned up, 20 people who were senior managers. And again, my first gut reaction to that was, there's something wrong here. You can't have 20 people running a company this size. This company should be run with 5 or 6 people as the core, and then think about your management structure beyond that. As I went around the room, everybody had a title, head of this, head of that. They were all they're all equally senior. So that also told me very quickly that there was no structure to the business and probably no proper accountability. Now, again, I was young and I didn't pay attention to that as I should have done. And the advice I was being given by my mentor, and this character who was thought of as a real business success, his advice was coming to me as part of saving his exposure to this debt, as opposed to coming to me as a impartial third party that helping me sort something out. So that talking about it is really, really important. And noticing that's a belief system is your first step to changing it. I think I failed with something, made a good plan, but the business didn't go as planned. Closed it and started a new thing. I learned that I'm a scientist more than an entrepreneur. Yeah, you're probably very much a scientist first, and you will learn to be an entrepreneur. A great definition when you think about entrepreneur is, and this was taught to me years ago, and I've always held on to it. An entrepreneur is someone that can leverage assets they don't own. So when you're starting a business, you don't have all the assets you need. You don't have all the money. You don't have all the people and so forth, so that you can start to leverage it by getting other people involved, getting favors, getting people to give you stock when you can't pay for it. So you do learn to be an entrepreneur. You do learn those skills over time. And the same way you didn't become a scientist overnight, you're not going to become an entrepreneur overnight. So I'm glad that you've started a new thing, and I wish you all the success, but to keep taking the things, that the failures apart, and say, what more did I learn? Because I think you probably learn more than just not being an entrepreneur. Another one, let me read this one. I've learned that my own, that if I own a concept for a project, I'm best suited to lead it. I could pick that one apart. Previously, I experienced a significant failure in a university project by allowing someone else. Okay, so your failure in the previous experience may well just have been your failure in leadership. So learning to lead projects and people is a significant skill set. So don't just equate it, because I think the trap in this particular comment for the person that's put it up is this idea that if I do it, it'll get done. Now, that seems reasonable, but that is what I call the hub and spoke trap. And that's what traps so many managers and so many entrepreneurs and leaves them in a situation where they're highly stressed and most decisions pass through them. So that when you rethink about that project that failed, think about it more in terms of what you could learn about your leadership and how you set it up and how you managed it, more so than the obvious answer that if you lead it, that it's more likely to succeed, because that in itself will trap you. I mean to continue my career as a scientist and stop the business. As part of a skillful team of developers who've decided to use our skills to build a very first product on a company, we did build the product and put our effort into fine-tuning it, and then we came to marketing and totally failed on that part. We realized that we're just developers. Okay, so yeah. So again, a couple of things I would want to pick out for this person is really think about the phrase that we're only developers. You're not only developers, you're creative people. And hey, you know what? You know how to code and develop. And there's this new set of skills about marketing and listening to the market. Like the scientist comment I was making earlier, you've got to then put the effort into learning about marketing. So, and when you box yourself off as only, you're really giving yourself a limiting belief system that traps you in the I can't go learn that. Think about was Steve Jobs only a marketing person, or was he only a product developer, or was he only the guy who put the first computer together in his garage? Entrepreneurs and leaders in general, especially of small businesses and startups, have to be well-rounded. We have to embrace the challenges of having multiple skill sets. And then obviously knowing when it's time and we have the money to hire the the skills we need into the business. But don't trap yourself with those sort of I'm only this. I'm only an Irishman, therefore I can't do X, Y, Z. So those only comments or belief systems that can really get you trapped. I learned the good ideas need the right time. Yep, timing is absolutely a fact. Timing is part of the process. But again, also examine what else you learned about that situation. Was it simply timing, or is timing a very convenient thing to tag to it so you don't get to do the learning in depth? So that was really good. I mean, there's a lovely quote from Oprah Winfrey, the stateside broadcaster. And I think it's one of them. I'm going to look at it here and read it to you, but and it relates to this idea of failure and really thinking about how you approach life. and I mean, her rise to fame and fortune and being, driving her own business eventually had loads of failures in it. But one of the things that she says to herself and she shares with people is you don't get in life what you want, you get what you are. So think about that for a second. So you don't get in life what you want, you get what you are. So again, what I want to do is open that up to the group. If you were interpreting that, what would you say back to Oprah Winfrey? Either would you ask her another question, or if you were understanding the words that she just said from your point of view, what do you think the message is? And so I'll read it again. You don't get in life what you want, you get what you are. And thank you all for typing and sharing. It makes my role so much easier when I've got people to interact with, as you can tell. I really appreciate it. Elena, what do you think about Oprah's statement?
Oh,
What do you think she meant?
well, first thing that came to my mind was, I don't know, you are what you attract in some way, because if you have the mindset and you're trying to be this person you want to be, it's helpful, It's that having the right mindset, I'd say. That was what I got from it.
Yeah, I got an answer here. You have to work hard and learn to be what you want. That's a great answer. Learn to be what you want. That's so many people, who aren't mentally resilient. You hear them talk, and all you hear them say is why the world, I mean, to your point, Elena, attract what you want. Why the world's against them, why it wasn't the right time, why, I could have, said and complained that company I bought was full of people who told lies, and it was. But that wasn't going to allow me to fail, or that wasn't going to be the reason I failed. The reason I would have failed is if I'd given up. So I think that you have to work hard and learn to be what you want. That's a great answer back to Oprah. I might actually send her that. Um, I would say I generally agree with her. However, to become what you want, you need to know what you want. Another brilliant observation. Thank you for that. Um, yeah, and I think knowing what you want sounds reductive. It sounds really simple, but it takes a long time, and it takes these deep dives into self to get to that understanding. It is not as simple and straightforward. Now, there are some people. My older brother, for instance, he was born black and white. You know, there's just right and wrong answers to everything, and he is a picture of who he is. It's been there since I can ever remember, probably when he was 16 or 17. And it hasn't changed very much. Now, has he had a successful life? It depends how you judge success. I would say yes, very successful, successful family, successful marriage, lived in the same house his whole life. And he doesn't really do the questioning about who he is. You know, he won't even go there and take a hard look. But for others of us who are more into doing something significant or difficult, like setting up businesses, I think it is a question that we have to ponder and get to some answer and watch it as it's changing, because it does change over time. Also, we have the knowledge, but not all are ready to pay the price to change. Um, I would say just to that comment, that's sort of an external comment to yourself. So have the knowledge and then ask yourself if you're willing to pay the price to change. Because as you implement changes in yourself, there is a price to pay, whether that's other people accepting or not accepting who you are, or, you know, putting those hours in and that time in, without losing the important things around you. You know, again, on a personal level, um, you know, my first marriage broke up around the time I was 30 and set up my business. And it wasn't me setting up the business that caused it. It was already caused before that, because I was so focused on my career that I wasn't focused on my family. And that slipped away. And it was a devastating blow. I had to learn that was down to where I put my focus. And I had this rule in my head, which was my customers need me, so I have to be available to them at all times. But then when a court tells you that you can only see your son 2 days a week, I found that I could get home from anywhere in Europe on a Tuesday and a Friday, and before that was impossible. And what I had to do to make that happen is I had to tell customers things like, I got to get home to see my son. And I was so surprised at the compassion I got from everybody, because everybody got behind it and everybody helped me get there. Everybody helped me be where I needed to be and focus on that important side of my life, and still did good business. We still did what we needed to get done. That was a huge learn for me. So this idea of understanding yourself and making yourself a learning project is the first part about building this mental resilience. Now, I need to know, because one of the things we'd set out in the pre-work was, hey, go to the App Store, get the Brilliant Buttons app and do Duet. So can I get a sort of, hey, if you've done Duet or if you've got the app, can you let me know in chat? So I can adopt this next part of it to whether you have or have not. Can I get so I've got a no, okay. I'll not hold it against you. I don't imagine, just the way this has been set up, that many of you have, but I just need to check. Okay, so there is, the Brilliant Buttons app. that you can download and do an exercise which will help you with your core values. So what I'm going to do is just assume no one's done that. And then I'm going to talk about how to do core values. And what I would suggest then between this session and the next session, download the app because it's going to be really helpful in the next session. And it's going to be useful for you to reflect on this next segment. So this next segment is really linking the concept of learning about yourself, and that means learning about your core values. So I'm going to ask you to interact with me on chat as we do this, so I can sort of see as you go along. So the first question I want to throw out there is, when you think about core values, just that term, core values. Now, this is core values as it relates to you as a person. I can talk about the link to core values of your company and building culture second. So what I'd like to know is, when you think about the term core values, what comes to your mind? Like, what do you think core values are? Yeah, roots of a tree is a good metaphor for core values. It's a great metaphor, really. It's about keeping you grounded. You know, roots help a tree stand for a very long period of time. The roots feed the tree and they keep it anchored in place. They're part of what stops it getting blown over in the wind, not just the fact that its branches can move. Great metaphor, thank you. Any other thoughts on core values? Beliefs that guide you, absolutely. Core values are part of that belief system that you create. And, you know, how they're created for you over time. Values that you don't break. Absolutely. That's what makes them core. Anyone, any idea about how many core values most people operate with? What sort of average number of core values is? Principles that guide our behavior, interactions, help us make decisions. Absolutely. Five to seven. Yeah, maybe 5 to 7. It's more likely 4 to 5. So it's generally not a big number. And sometimes it's between 3 and 5 really. And the real challenge is finding the ones that are core. So that, the principles that guide your behavior and interactions, values you don't break. It's a great test for a value. The root metaphor, the 4 or 5 roots that hold the tree up. The main roots, not all the tendrils. So when you're thinking about core values, it's not a big number of things, but it takes a bit of work and effort to really clarify, the ones that you're using for yourself and why they're important. So let's talk about how you do that work. Now, normally, if I was doing an in-person workshop, this next section would take maybe 40, 50 minutes. So we're going to run through it, and the more you actively do, sitting where you're sitting, the better you're going to get some value from this. I want you to think about, get a piece of paper in front of you. And I want you to divide it into 3 columns. So you're going to have 3 columns on a piece of paper. And this is really going to be a discussion to yourself, and with yourself. So on the first column, the left-hand column, write the word values at the top. So you've got a column on the left-hand side, it's got values at the top. In the middle column, I want you to write the word beliefs. And in the column on the right-hand side, then the last column, I want you to write behaviors. Now I'll explain what these are. So the value is a word you're going to use that is a label for what you stand for. So one of the challenging questions I get when we're doing this in person is people will say, oh, is this word a value? And sometimes people debate with each other whether the word is allowed to be a value or not. People give words meaning, not the other way around. So it doesn't really matter what that word is that's in your first column. If it's your word for that value, that label for that value, then just use it. So don't get hung up. This is not about wordsmithing. This is not about marketing. This is about a dialogue with yourself so you understand yourself, and later on you can share this with other people. In the belief system is attached to that value. What is the belief that you hold on to that why that value is important to you in terms of making you a success? And then in the behavior column is what behaviors do you and others see. So it's really important. What behaviors do you and others see when that value is actually being activated? So I'll give you one example. I'll give you an example from me, and then you can spend a little bit of time working on this. And I'm going to give you like 10 minutes to do this. So we're going to have a bit of radio silence. I'll try not to speak while you're doing it. So one of my core values is creativity. So not surprisingly, when I was growing up, it was my one thing that I could do that others couldn't. I could draw. I could draw an ellipse, but apparently that was quite difficult for 5-year-olds. So it meant I could draw hats really well, which made me popular when people wanted to do pictures of cowboys and Indians. So this creativity thing made me stand out. And later on, I would make little clay ornaments, and I would sell them to my family. And it was the one thing that made me different than my brother. So I really held on to it as an important value that was core to who I was. The belief system that I started attached to it made me unique. It meant I could solve problems. It was a way to get from A to Z, in a new route. So I knew creativity was an important part of how I succeeded with things. Even how I got my first job. I went in and made up my first job by myself to work in a printing shop. They had no job advertised, so I came up with this idea. So creativity is all about ideas. And then in terms of behaviors, you would see, so you typically see me doing things like when we come to a problem in a team, I would whiteboard it. So I would use a place where I could get people to share ideas. I would encourage people to do much like what we're doing here, is you're posting up answers to things so I can see multiple answers and I can draw connections between them. So that idea of generating ideas and generating information and then connecting the dots is a sort of behavior that shows up because of my creativity. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about your core values, those 3 columns, and at least try to get 1 or 2 written through. And again, don't rush this. Really think about what's the word that I would use to describe me as a value, that's important to me. What are the beliefs I attach to that value? So what am I writing in behind that value? And then what behavior shows up? How does that show up in a meeting, day to day with my family? Because you don't separate your core values out from work and normal life. It just becomes part of what you are. So I give you to the top of the hour, which is another 7 minutes. And I'm going to use that 7 minutes to get myself a coffee. So I'm going to turn off my camera, but I'm still here, so don't think I've just. You 4 more minutes. Last minute. Okay, so I'd be interested in any questions that came from that. So you did that exercise. Do you have any questions for me about doing the exercise? And if anyone feels brave enough to share a values, beliefs, behavior statement, it would be really interesting to read one. So go ahead and either ask questions or share something you've done. For those people still on the call, you're showing great mental resilience. It is a challenge being on a learning exercise like this and staying with it, given that we have limited interactions through chat. Any questions anybody want to share? Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So I've got one of your colleagues has got passion and commitment as a clash. So what I would encourage you to do is notice them. So I would probably say at this stage, hold both and notice when commitment is the one that you don't want to break and works for you. And also notice where passion fits in. Because it's really about discovery process, it's about, putting the belief system attached to the concept of commitment. What you're saying is, because at hard times it's commitment that pushes you forward. Equally, it might be at hard times it's your passion for the project that pushes you forward. So it'd be worth maintaining vigilance on that for a time and thinking about, what is the belief system that's showing up in your head, that voice in your head that speaks to you, and also noticing the behaviors that go along with it. Passion can be a very powerful motivator of yourself and others. It can also be something that destroys things. So, that's why watching it and watching the behaviors over time is really important. Okay, so the value of curiosity. I believe I'd love to listen more and read more. So the belief system is you're saying that if I listen and read, I develop the type of wisdom that can help people solve problems, and therefore you get involved in problem-solving behavior. Good, good. I would say let's pay attention to that over time and also try to discover what's motivating that value that's really important. So curiosity is a it's something I would share with you as a value. Integrity, yeah. Integrity is great because it's one of those words that shows up And it's also one of those really challenging core values. So the associated belief is honesty and fairness are paramount in all forms of communication and action. Yeah, I mean, who's not gonna agree with that? So in the personal life, person who values integrity might always tell the truth to their family and friends. So this is a great one, and thank you for sharing it, because it's one of those more challenging ones. Because so statistically, as human beings, we all lie. So there you go. So integrity can be a very hard one to hold on to. And it can also be very hard to hold on to that behavior that says, I'm going to be truthful to my family and friends, because that's often the people that we aren't obviously truthful with because we're trying to protect them from the truth, from reality. So this one's a really interesting one. I'm not saying it's not a core value. Of course, you hold it as that. But what I would challenge you to do over a period of time is to watch it in action and watch when it gets tested and see how you would address the description to yourself. And so that you really get a handle on what are the boundary set attached to that. Self-identification is kind of popped up for me. I find it a simple, although it's hard and need to do a lot of self-reflection. Yeah, so the concept of doing this starts off, seems reasonable, but you're right, it takes a lot more self-awareness. And here's what I've discovered over 30 years of working in this space is most people don't do this piece of work. So most people show up and work, and people who come to work for you will do the same. And they don't spend this time out and think about, who am I? What do I stand for? They're not thinking about, who am I going to become? And they take their values for granted. They take it for granted because it's already baked into their family system or the way their mom and dad brought them up. But they've not really sat down to examine them. And if I look at my family, the values that I have, pardon me, certainly there's some I share with my brother for sure, because we grew up in a similar space. We had similar experiences. But there's other values that he has that are very different from mine. And his value around being black and white and inflexible is very different from mine. My value is always to try to find common ground for people and try to make things move. So it's an important thing, and there's research. Kuz and Posner did some research in this space to talk about why it's so important for you in your business life, and then when you're building culture, is that when a company has values but people don't understand their own values, that has the least useful impact on productivity. So that reduces productivity. When a person knows their own values and the company doesn't have values, that person is generally more productive than someone who doesn't know. When the person knows their own core values and the company's got values, then that connection between the two is the most productive. So, and when a company has values, but people don't know their own values, that makes them the least productive because they feel intimidated by the company's values. They don't make sense. So this piece of self-analysis is really important. And it's important because it's the foundation by which you can obviously use to make decisions. But most importantly, when problems occur and you have to come back with a strategy to get yourself back into that positive mindset, this is the place to go first. This is your first coping strategy. Something happens. I have an old saying that I use when I'm coaching people, nobody's going to die, so let's take a step back. And what you do is you take a step back and you say, okay, so how am I going to respond to this situation? And your response, if it's aligned with your core values, is going to make you feel more satisfied than if it isn't. And your core values are also going to help you develop perspective and understanding, because in all of these situations where things don't go exactly to plan, you've had some part to play. And yes, other people have a part to play. So someone wrote a comment up there, in a situation that wasn't your fault, like the company closed and you'd nowhere to work, yeah, there are definite situations like that, which is outside of your control. The economy tanks, people lose jobs. But what's always inside your control is how you respond to it. And what's always connected to that response is your core value system, your core beliefs, and those behaviors. So you can always approach it by grounding yourself, like the tree metaphor we talked about earlier, in what is your core values. And that can often help you come back with a much more effective response, something that you feel not only comfortable with, but really satisfied by. That you're not just having a knee-jerk reaction to something, that you've considered it in terms of who you are and how you react and respond to the world. And also, I think from the learning point of view, you consider it from, what have you learned about you? So as I said, one of my core values is creativity, which can mean that I'm not super structured. So even like for this session, I have a complete, blow by blow map as to what we're going to cover. But I absolutely adore the fact that you guys are putting comments up in the comment section. So I can have that flexibility to use what you're saying to link to ideas that I want to share with you. I feel super comfortable with. Now, there's other people who wouldn't feel as comfortable with that. And what I learned over time is how to accommodate them on my team and how to really, truly value them on my team so that their differences make us stronger. And I don't fight to try to make people be more like me, because that would be crazy. So the diversity of values in your team are really important, but it has to begin with you understanding like I say, 3 to 5. It's not going to be more than that. I mean, you may end up with 7 to begin, and over time you'll bring it back to something that is governable. But if you think about a tree and its root system, it's usually 4 to 5 big roots that are grounding the tree, and it's the same for us. These are the rules that govern our life and make us think about who we are and how we respond to people. So before I move on to the exercise, I'm going to set you as a learning exercise. Do I have any questions? Has anybody got any burning questions that haven't been answered by my ramblings? Anything that you really would like me to address for you? So can you talk more about the best ethical values and how to improve them? Oh, ethics and values. Well, that is a huge subject. I suppose that the simple way I would think about it is what makes your values ethical. So ethics is a framework, which is a really social construct. So it's bigger than just us as individuals. And so it's part of the society we grew up in, the laws of the land, the rule system that's bigger than just us within the rule system. So ethically, for instance, we know it's not a really good idea to lie, cheat, or steal, or take other people's property. So ethics are a sort of larger framework we fit within. And I think there's a link between ethics and our core values in that do we live our core values with that sort of authenticity, ethically. So, I could say I'm a real creative person, so I learned how to code so that I could go in and steal people's pension funds. So that would still live in creativity, but it's outside of the rule of ethics. So I think the challenge with in the first instance is I think most people live within that global framework of the ethics of our society. Most people do, because most people aren't criminals. It's only a small percentage of the population is. It's then how do you authentically live out your core values to your own standards, so that to the wonderful point about integrity, if that's what you mean by integrity, how well do you shape up to that? What do you learn about that? How honest can you be? I mean, one of the goals I set myself over the last 10 years was to really embed honesty into the way I work. And the reason I wrote that for myself was so I could tell clients the honest answer to things, even at the risk of them sacking me, because I was just feeling the boredom more than anything else of pandering to other people's egos as opposed to telling them the absolute truth based on 25 years of experience dealing with people. So I had to re-examine my values and sort of decide what are the ethical boundaries around those that I'm going to work within. And for me, that's how I redefined being honest. It was to tell people the truth at the risk of being sacked. And so now when I go to tell them the truth, I tell them I'm about to tell you something that you probably sack me for because you won't like it. And for the most part, clients don't sack me, but I have had some that have done and get really, really pissed off at the fact that they're being told the truth. But I think that's part of my job now. That's part of my role as a coach. What is something we can use to keep us motivated and committed in the darkest times? I mean, I do honestly believe that comes down to two parts. But the foundation part is your values. In the darkest days, if you can sit and say, who am I? And these words that I've written out for myself on that sheet of paper, these words that I've examined over time, that's who I am. So that sort of allows you to hold on to your self-esteem and your self-belief. And I think the other part of it is, to have that sort of vision of you will prevail. There's a wonderful story about a POW in the Second World War called Stockdale. And I think he became Admiral Stockdale in the end, but he was kept in the Hanoi Hilton. So he was for like about 8 years, he was buried in a hole in the ground, and he was detached from his soldiers or his sailors, as it was. And when they eventually released him, when he was rescued, as it was, the rescuers were amazed, and the psychologists were amazed. This man was not broken. This man was still positive. And so they coined something called the Stockdale paradox. And I think this is really important and a good answer to your question. So unlike the other prisoners who had built themselves up, we're going to be rescued by Christmas, we're going to be rescued by Easter, we're going to be rescued by the summertime. And each time they weren't rescued, then they had this crushing sense of failure and loss. And when they interviewed him, they discovered he just had the simple belief system that he was going to be rescued. Not a time limit attached to it. He would just be rescued. He would prevail. And as part of that process, he even invented like a Morse code tapping communication, so he could communicate with his other captees, if you like, prisoners in these various holes in the ground. He took beating after beating. He, think of all the abuse that you could go on. He was malnourished, but he maintained this belief system that he would prevail. Now, part of that was, down to his religious beliefs, and his belief in God. But when the psychologist boiled it down, it was this sense of he would prevail is what allowed him to succeed and come out of that hole when he was rescued as a whole human being and not someone terribly scarred, like the other prisoners had to go through a lot of mental rehab just to come through that. So that was it's a great story to think about, that when it's dark, when it's difficult, if you can really believe that you will prevail. Now, that does not mean to say you're going to get the success you're looking for, or you're going to win the deal, or you're going to make your millions. It just means that you will prevail in the sense that you will carry on and you will get to where you're going, and you will eventually achieve what you want to achieve. It may not shape up exactly as you first thought, and it very rarely does, but you will prevail. So in the Stockdale case, he knew exactly who he was, so he held strongly to his values. And the second thing he held on to was that belief system that he would prevail. He would live, he would see his family again, he would be rescued, and it would happen sometime. He didn't put time limits on it. And a lot of the time when you talk to really successful entrepreneurs, you'll hear a similar story, not told exactly the same way, but their sense of belief in that they will achieve what they've set out to achieve, that they will be successful, that they will see the future in some shape or form like the future they're envisaging, is part of what drives them and keeps them motivated. Failures are just part of the sequence that they go through. So we've got a few minutes left. So I want to set you a task, which you can decide to do or not do, the folks that are left on the call. But I want you to work a little bit more on your values, beliefs, your behaviors until you've got at least 3 to 4 written down. And then your goal that I'm setting you, and goals are a really important part of this learning process, is the goal is to live the values, beliefs, and behaviors that you put on that piece of paper for 30 days. So for 30 days, you're going to check in on them. So for 30 days, you're going to reflect on how well you did with those in the day. I want you to think about doing a check-in after difficult meetings, after good meetings, at home with your family. So I want you to keep a journal of how you've been living the core values. And really sort of recognize what it is you're learning from the words you've written down to what you actually see yourself do. And that learning is going to deepen your self-awareness. To help you do that, if you go to the App Store, either Android or Apple, and you type in Brilliant Buttons, you'll find the app, download it, set up your account. There's an exercise in there called Duet. So it's a way to give you a view of your overarching values, the things that are dominating your thinking. So when you're filling in the answers to that, don't try to game it. Literally just think, I recognize this statement as me, and that's how you fill it in. And then you can find a journey that'll tell you a little bit more about Duet. And in the middle of your home screen, you'll see AI Assist, which is an artificial intelligence assistant. So you can go in there and ask about Duet. And on one of the other cards, you'll see a Duet assistant, a Duet coach. So you can go into either, and the AI will help you understand that more, understand other teams. And I think you might also, Elena, if you can help me, find a sheet where you can do the living your core values exercise. So you can find a worksheet to work with. If you do that for a month, it's a bit like going to the gym. So this, personal development is like gym membership. Everybody buys gym membership and then don't go. And guess what? They don't get fit, they don't build muscles, and they don't look any better. The people who buy gym membership and go every day, or five times a week or 3 times a week, get fitter, build better muscles, become better human specimens. So your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to do this work, and then to try to build this work into a habit that you do every day. And when we get on to this afternoon session, I'm going to use the app more. So please, if you're joining, join and have the app. And I'll talk more about mindset and how to actually observe your mindset and what you can do to learn from your mindset, because that's what you're going to do. You need to learn from your mindset so you create strategies to get you into a growth mindset more often. And that will add the two things together. But your foundation piece starts with your values, because your values determine who you are. And that's our session, everybody. If you've any other questions, we've got a few minutes left. You can pop them on the board. I'll answer them. Or you can go and get the app. And inside the app, you can ask a question of a coach, which will come directly to me. And I can answer them in there. So any final questions? If there aren't any, I'd like to thank you all for your participation. I really appreciate those of you who answered in the chat. That made my life so much easier. I welcome you all into the app. It's free, so you're getting a free coaching and support tool, which should help you develop your leadership skills for sure. And I look forward to seeing those of you who wish to come back this afternoon on the session about part 2, which is using your mindset and building a growth mindset as part of your resilience. Thank you all.